We are excited to introduce the STEM Behind Hollywood program. We will spend some time demonstrating our first classroom-ready activity in the series, Zombie Apocalypse. We will then learn more about Dr. Schlozman and Dr. Bialik in a live question and answer session. We will also share additional free STEM resources at the end of this event. Finally, we will have a live prize drawing. 2 lucky attendees will win a TI-Nspire handheld autographed by Dr. Schlozman and Dr. Bialik. This is a must-be-present-to-win drawing, which will be held at the end of the webinar. Our goal for this webinar is to give you some great resources to make STEM concepts come to life in your classroom using TI-Nspire technology. We'll also highlight the TI-Nspire's color and animation features in this cool zombie-themed activity. STEM Behind Hollywood is an exciting new program created by TI with the assistance of the Science and Entertainment Exchange, a program of the National Academy of Sciences, to get students excited about STEM education and careers. These activities are for the TI-Nspire family of products centered around the math and science behind popular Hollywood themes like zombies, superheroes, space, and forensics. They use the concepts behind popular movie and TV shows to present real-world math and science concepts that students will learn just like real-life scientists and mathematicians. So if you visit the webpage stemhollywood.com, you can scroll down and find some really interesting things, such as how to sign up for email alerts so you can be alerted when we have new activities that are launched. And then the activity we're going to highlight tonight is a zombie activity. So you can click on See the Activity, and you'll see here that you can download the teacher notes, the student worksheet, and most importantly, the TI-Nspire activity file. And what if you don't have TI-Nspire technology at this point? Well, you can download a free trial software by clicking that link. Tonight's webinar focuses on the zombie apocalypse activity, and we have with us the expert who consulted on its creation, Dr. Schlozman. Dr. Schlozman is an assistant professor of psychiatry and co-director of medical student education in psychiatry at the Harvard Medical School, but that is just his formal introduction. His other job is being one of the foremost experts on zombies in the country. He has written a book called The Zombie Autopsies, Secret Notebooks from the Apocalypse. As a member of the Science and Entertainment Exchange, a program of the National Academies of Sciences, he is Hollywood's go-to expert on zombie science. Dr. Schlozman, thank you for joining us tonight.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Schlozman, let's go through this activity on the TI-Nspire software and give our educators on the webinar this evening a look at the zombie apocalypse activity by the real zombie expert.
Sure. I'll only do this with the caveat that we all acknowledge that this will not happen. There are no zombies. I want to be clear about that. So with that caveat, let's look at this first slide. So what do we got?
Well, now that we are reviewing the TI-Nspire teacher software with the zombie apocalypse open, just as a reminder, you can get a free trial of the software and the zombie apocalypse activity, as well as the teacher and student support notes at stemhollywood.com. So, Dr. Schlozman, I know that you have a lot of experience with this particular zombie apocalypse activity. I was hoping that maybe you could walk us through some of the highlights of this activity. So right now we're just looking at the cover page of the activity.
Yep. So, so this cover page, yeah, I can. So it basically comes from the book that I wrote. Those are some of the drawings. The book I wrote is actually a story, but it's really a kind of sneaky way to teach some neuroscience and some epidemiology. And the point of this is for you to notice that the gentleman you see on the far left looks like he's not feeling great, but doesn't feel horrible. He's got a cold and he's coughing. And then as he makes his way towards the gentleman on the far right, he's really, really sick. He's not doing well. And as a physician, I feel sort of strongly that we're not going to call him something other than human. We're going to call him a sick human. But as in keeping with the genre, he is now a zombie. So he is a humanoid or a zombified human. And the storyline, if you're familiar with the genre, is that these infections spread like wildfire. And those are the same exact way that infections spread in real life, but it's a lot easier to talk about, and we're talking about something that's not quite as scary. And because zombies aren't real, they're by definition less scary.
Perfect. So what do we find on the second page? Yeah.
Just the storyline. We don't need to read it out loud, but what y'all see is basically two things I want to draw to your attention. One is we got a bug, we got a virus that's affecting the brains of the humans, and this allows you and as teachers to talk about what regions of the brain can be attacked by the virus and what that virus would have to do. And also we see how that virus is spread. If we're going to get to the level of a pandemic, show the spread of the bug and the alarming rate that this program shows, it's going to have to be airborne. Most epidemiologic projections suggest that in the absence of an airborne bug, it's awfully hard to get to a pandemic. You couldn't have a pandemic of rabies, for example. You'd recognize the problem and sort of isolate folks. So those are the two biggies to take home here. We got a bug infecting the brain, and it's being spread the same way you spread a common cold, which is scary. So how does it do it? Well, it goes after your brain, and this is actually the sort of key point to the functional neuroscience activity here. Step one of any scientific exercise in the classroom, and I used to be a high school teacher, so I used to do this all the time, is to observe. So you show your students, maybe you imitate in front of the classroom, or you show them yourself a slow, shambling zombie. Not the fast ones, the slow ones. Those are the most consistent with the zombie storyline. They're like the ones we see in The Walking Dead. And they're also the ones that I find actually scarier. And they lend themselves best to functional neurobiology. So if you imitate that slow, shambling zombie, you can then tell them, well, this allows us to talk about 4 particular regions of the brain. We could talk about more, but it's good to limit it to 4 at this point. And you can see those down at the bottom of the slide, the cerebellum, the hypothalamus, the frontal lobe, and the amygdala. And each of those play different roles in getting you from the sort of human stage to the zombie stage.
Thanks.
Sure. So you got it shown here graphically. So the frontal lobe, as you can see, is creatively named because it sits in the front part of the brain. So just to orient you, that green area is the frontal lobe, and if you tap your forehead, you'll be tapping the skull that sits right above your frontal lobe. It's actually where your skull is, by the way, thickest, because the frontal lobe is super, super important. It's the part of the brain that helps you to solve problems. So we'll be implicating that since we know that zombies are really bad problem solvers. It's also the part of the brain that helps you to control impulsivity, and zombies are incredibly impulsive. So we can suggest, we've never seen a sort of waiting zombie. Zombies are never hesitant. So we can suggest the frontal lobe doesn't work. If we go back now, you look at the blue area, that's the cerebellum. That's the more primitive region of the brain, but responsible for balance. There's another region called the basal ganglia, but here you want to just focus on the cerebellum and say to your students, the zombies don't walk well. They lack balance, and if you think about things that attack your cerebellum, whenever something attacks the cerebellum, whether it's a disease or a growth or a tumor or cerebellar degeneration, it makes it difficult to walk. That's why they hold their hands out in front of them. Then you get 2 smaller structures which are actually deep to the brain, and we can see in this cross-section of the brain, but would be harder to see in a model. One is the hypothalamus. It's that orange structure there, and there's a region of the hypothalamus that's responsible for what's called satiety. That's the region of the brain that helps you to know when you've eaten enough to receive signals from your gut, and we might tend to ignore it on holidays like Thanksgiving, but zombies really don't have that option. Zombies have something wrong with their hypothalamus. We can hypothesize that they're not real, so we can hypothesize whatever we want, but that's what we're going to say for these zombies. So they're hungry all the time, and then zombies are mean. I've not ever seen zombie movies I like where the zombies are particularly nice. So what region of the brain is responsible for just out-and-out rage? That would be the amygdala. That's actually Greek for almond-shaped, and you can see it's right there, that sort of red almond-shaped structure. It's really a very, very primitive region of the brain. It's responsible for just fight or flight. It's all there is to things like crocodiles. That's all there is to a crocodile brain. So when the amygdala says fight or flight, but the hypothalamus says I'm hungry, the amygdala says, okay, let's fight. So they stumble because of their cerebellum. They can't open the door once you get behind a door because their frontal lobe's not working so well. And the hypothalamic deficiency makes them, or malfunction, makes them not know that they've ever eaten enough. That's why zombies are never satisfied.
Thank you. I really like the color on this slide, and again, I think it's important for anyone that isn't extremely familiar with the TI-Nspire handheld, the CX handheld, that this shows up in color on your student's handheld as you're seeing it right now.
Absolutely. So here you see the sort of descriptions of what we just talked about, and I think what's a really fun exercise to do is to as I said, imitate the zombies up front, and before you even tell them how zombies behave, ask them to tell you how zombies behave. What do you observe? That's step number one of any scientific exercise. What do you see? And hopefully they'll say, well, they don't walk well, and hopefully they'll say they're hungry, and if you're a good enough actor, they'll also notice that they're really bad at solving problems. Maybe you can sort of stumble in opening up your desk drawer or something, and you can look really angry and maybe pretend to bite one of your students' ears, but not really do it, because I would advise against that. And in all of those cases, what you're doing is showing what we call functional neuroanatomy, or different regions of the brain responsible for different behaviors. So here's where it starts to get fun. Here we have a human, a mohawked human, your everyday, ordinary mohawked human, unsuspectingly having breathed in the saliva droplets that have the zombie virus in it. And to the right of him, we have his brain. And that's a normal brain. That's a healthy brain. But because we have a fairly virulent infection, that means this infection is very likely to make sick anybody that it comes into contact to. He's not going to stay that way. So let's see what happens to him. You click on the go button, and you will see him start to change from stages 1 to stage 3 and stage 4. So stage 0, he's fine. Stage 1, we're at the early infection. You can see the color differentiation, which again is a very key concept for the handheld devices, which I really do think helps you to appreciate the functional aspect of the brain. Each region of the brain has its own job, and all of those regions have to talk to each other in a kind of seamless way to make you human. So if you go from that nice, colorful green frontal lobe to that now grayish frontal lobe, you can suggest that the frontal lobe itself is taking a hit. You'll also notice that the frontal lobe is more what we call atrophied, more shrunken. There's more space in between those lines, and that's what you see in frontal lobe deterioration, which would be consistent with what I'd expect to find if zombies happen to be real. What would you expect to see? That's early, so that's when he's just starting to get sick. He might just feel like he has a cold at this point and have a little bit of a hard time solving problems, which we all have when we have the flu. But as we move forward, we'll notice now that his not only is his frontal lobe shrunk even more relative to the back part of his brain, but his cerebellum has gotten smaller too. And that you would see in the zombie himself or herself in their inability to sort of walk without losing their balance. That's when you start to see that stumbling, shambling look. You can also see the slight discoloration of the amygdala and the hypothalamus as those regions of the brain start to be affected as well. And this is just like any disease. Everything has a natural history, so as we go from stage 2 to stage 3, you will see that now we've got him starting to get mad. So the amygdala itself has been stimulated. That's why it's now in bright red. The hypothalamus has been stimulated, so now he's hungry. And he's not looking at you with any intention other than to eat you. That's why you can't really get mad at a zombie, by the way. I always tell people this. It's like getting mad at a crocodile. They're just doing zombies too. They just eat. So almost no frontal lobe, almost no cerebellum. Can't walk that well, certainly can't control his impulses, can't solve any problems, and really only has one thing on his mind, and that's I would like to take a bite of whatever I happen to run into. And then the final stage of this is really the kind of accentuation of all of what we've seen coming. So you can see now that you've got almost no frontal lobe, really total inability to recognize self and other, almost no cerebellum. This is the zombie that sort of pulls itself pitifully along the ground. Huge amygdala, huge hypothalamus, hungry, rageful. This is what we want our students to think about how to prevent, and we can do that by looking at the epidemiology of how this bug spreads.
Dr. Schlozman, my students, I went through this activity today with them, and they were convinced that there is a resemblance between that zombie and myself. And I didn't see it, but they did have a couple questions that I think are worthwhile discussing. And one is we noticed that there's a lot of scarring on the zombie's face. Is there anything from a medical standpoint that would be causing that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we're sort of reverse engineering our zombie. What we're taking are are the images of the zombies that come from the movies that first start with Night of the Living Dead that George Romero created. It's the only monster that was created actually on the screen, as opposed to coming from old legends. And they always seem to be rotting. They always seem to be in the process of dying. And if you are very, very, very ill, one of the things that happens is your immune system takes a hit. And the places that are most vulnerable to being attacked by opportunistic infections are the places that are exposed to the outside world. So that would tend to be skin and mucous membranes. So the scar and grain of his skin that you see is really just a sign of decay that happens when any opportunistic infection, an infection that wouldn't usually get after you if you were healthy, has the opportunity now to set up shop and multiply.
Awesome. And then the second question, we notice that as we go from stage 0 to stage 4, that the frontal lobe, the cerebellum, those are certainly changing in size and getting smaller, and your amygdala and hypothalamus are enlarging in size. Would this continue down the road, and at some point would your frontal lobe and your cerebellum just completely cease to exist?
It's a great question. So here's where you have to think about it's a great way to sort of segue into thinking about the evolutionary biology behind the spread of disease. Well, a good disease, and by that I don't mean one that we want, I mean one we would like to eradicate, but a successful disease is able to keep its host alive long enough to accurately and efficiently spread the bug. So eventually, the zombies that I made up in the book I wrote, because I wanted to be as medically accurate as possible, will die. So the frontal lobe will keep shrinking a little bit. The cerebellum's going to keep shrinking even more. The zombie's going to, or this human's going to pass away, but not before he or she has the opportunity, because those other regions of the brain have stayed healthy long enough to spread this bug to a lot of other people. That's actually what sets up the pattern for an apocalypse. So if you compare that, for example, to something like Ebola, which is a god-awful, horrific virus, but it also is not a very efficient virus. Because it kills its victims so readily, the victims don't have the opportunity, or the virus doesn't have the opportunity to spread. So the usual approach to an outbreak of Ebola is to quarantine it. Because if you quarantine right away, you can just stop the spread right away and the bug goes back into the primate population. With the apocalyptic scenario we're creating with the zombies here, you're sick and wandering around way before you hit to stage 4, but you still have infected virions, individual virus particles that you're coughing around. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. I think my students will be happy with that answer. So I think we have.
Tell them not real though.
that was something that came up today. They were really trying to convince me that zombies were real.
Tell them they're not. So
I think we have a couple of slides.
Yeah. So this is the graph. So we got this crisis now, and this graph is incredibly cool. So one question that you can ask your students here is, what would you, from looking at this graph, where, if you were a public health official, because this is exactly what would happen, by the way, in places like the CDC or the World Health Organization or similar public health initiatives, they would have graphs like this that would plot on the x-axis the number of weeks going by, and on the y-axis the number of people who are increasingly infected. And you would say, well, where would you like to intervene? Do you want to wait until week 7 or week 8? Probably not, because if you look at week 8 to week 9, the slope of that curve dramatically increases. That's a logarithmic or an exponential curve. That's the terror of epidemiology. That's what you don't want to see. So you want to be aware of your bug somewhere around week 2 or 3 when your emergency rooms are able to observe it and recognize this is something separate, and then start to intervene so that you can decrease that slope. Know ways to slow both the spread of the bug and also to treat the bug. Now, there's another interesting question you can ask students here, which is, what do you expect that slope to do? Will that slope continue to go up, or will it eventually level off? If we look at the next slide, we can start to think about that. So here's an example of one of the questions you can ask the students: the greatest rate of infection occurred when? And this just gets them very used to reading the exact same graphs that, for example, our epidemiologists looked at when we had the outbreak of the H1N1 virus a couple years ago.
And again, I just want to interject. So these questions are built into this TI-Nspire file. But as I mentioned earlier, there is a separate student activity that you can download and print out for your students if you rather have them respond with paper and pencil. But again, all those questions that you would find in a student activity are all embedded in this TI-Nspire file. So there's a few questions here.
So this is an interesting slide right here. the two slides that just went by your screen basically show us the fact that as people get infected, there's less people to be infected. So when Dr. Bialik and I were beta testing this exercise with some students who were really smart and taught us as much as we taught them, we asked them, hey, what do you think is going to happen to this curve? And they said, it's just going to keep going up and up and up and up because they've seen all the zombie movies we've seen. But in fact, if there were really a zombie outbreak, it would level off, like all pandemics do, because there'd be less people to be infected. So somewhere around week 30, potentially, you'd see that graph start to level off a little bit. And you can show that on the handheld devices by playing around with the numbers and moving the rate of virulence around.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I'm completely, I'm not sure I understand what virulence is. Can you describe that again?
Sure, it's a great question. So it's a general term, and it's measured in a bunch of different ways. The general definition of virulence is the extent to which any given pathogen is likely to be successful in creating disease in the person who has contact with it. So it's, you could be coughed on by somebody with a coronavirus, with a cold virus, or rhinovirus, and you might not get that cold. So that pathogen would have a particularly low virulence. Sometimes virulence is measured in terms of the load of the contagion. If you cough 50 billion virions, it might be less than or more than if you cough 30 billion. But it generally means how likely are you to get sick upon exposure to the contagion. If you're highly likely, we'd at least like you to wear masks. That's why we wear masks during flu season, because that's flu, influenza, for example, is a very high virulence factor.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
So what are we seeing on this slide?
Let's turn to the next. See, I'm still looking at the pictures here. You want to go to the, can you move me to the next slide? There we go, okay. So this is cool. This is actually one of my favorite slides in the exercise because it's a little bit creepy how well the zombie thing lent itself to what epidemiologists do every day, and I had to do a lot of epidemiologic research when I was writing this book. So on your left, you see a square, a bunch of different squares, and this is a common way that epidemiologists will represent both infected and uninfected in a general population. So you'll see that the clear squares here represent the uninfected, and the red squares represent those who are infected in the population. And the random distribution of these red squares are meant to say that some are next to each other. It's not actually that helpful for the virus if one zombie is next to another zombie because you can't spread it. On the right, though, what you'll see is the slope of the graph as the number of humans decreases and the number of zombies increases. And then below that square thing on your left, you'll see that you can play with the virulence. So you can actually demonstrate in real time the virulence of a bug. So let's start by making it really scary. Let's turn the virulence from 4 up to, I don't know, let's say 7. You turn up to 7, you hit that green go button, and what you'll see in real time is people go from orange to red, orange to red, orange to red, and the slope going up and up and up, and then eventually, as we talked about, leveling off, which is exactly what you would expect with a pandemic. Now, that's with a highly virulent bug. What if we lowered that virulence down to 2? And now we push go. And what you'll see is, first of all, just time itself passes more slowly. The slope is slightly less, and it takes longer for that slope, more time, as measured on the x-axis, to level off. So the goal, the public health initiative here, would be to decrease the overall virulence. And you can do that in a bunch of ways. You might get better at protecting yourself against the disease. Simply wearing a mask will decrease virulence. So you might be able to decrease the virulence of the bug from 7 to 2 by having a big initiative where everybody hands out masks. If you go back and look at online of Toronto during the SARS epidemic, it was actually the addition of masks that led them to be able to shift that curve that you're looking at now to the less scary slope than what we saw the first time around. And I just think this is really cool because it allows you to see in real time what happens to a population as a pandemic spreads.
Thanks.
This is a favorite graph of this is actually Dr. Bialik's favorite graph. We've talked about this one a lot. So this, you can see this sort of X-shaped graph where you've got humans represented as the squares and the zombies represented as the red circles. I forgot to mention something. The scale of graphs changes a lot, and all of you are teachers, so you're aware of this. But I even have to remind my medical students of this all the time. Note that on that y-axis, the numbers have been different. They've been in the 30 to 40 to 60,000s, and here we're in the 6,000 to 12,000 to 18,000. So we're talking about different types of numbers of populations. We're also talking about different time scales on that x-axis. So they have to look at those even as they're interpreting the steepness of those slopes. But in general, what you're seeing here is that as the number of humans are infected, that overall number in the population goes down pretty much as the number of zombies goes up. So you have an S curve for the zombies and a reverse S curve for the humans. If you are an epidemiologist, you would look at this curve and you would say at somewhere around week 9, that's the sort of magic scary point. That's where we start to lose the battle. So what could we do? And this is what you would ask your students. What can we do? Can we shift this curve? Which direction would we want to shift it in order to give us more time? How would we want to, and what could we do to buy us more time? And these things actually lend themselves very nicely to pretty straightforward mathematical equations, which are available on those handheld devices.
And what I really like that I want to add is that as we reset this graph and then change the virulence, it automatically regenerates a new graph on page 2.3.
So you can think to yourself, yeah, so you can say, okay, we did something. We added masks to the population. By doing that, how did we change this curve? And before we show you that curve, why don't you tell me what you think you'll see? And then you can show them.
Great. So I want to switch now from actually discussing the TI-Nspire activity, and I appreciate you going through some of your favorite pieces of that activity, into just more of a Q&A about you. I'd like to get to know you a little bit better, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So the first question that I have for you is the Science and Entertainment Exchange. Sounds like an interesting program. What can you tell us a little bit about it and how you got involved?
Oh, it's incredibly cool. So if you're like me, I love movies. I grew up loving movies. Movies got to be really, really bad for me not to like it. But I realized after I started studying, I actually write academically about movies and how they affect the way the public thinks about the world. People believe what they see in movies. So the Science and Entertainment Exchange was created basically, with help from the National Academy of Science to help screenwriters, the people who are telling the stories that you see unfold on the big screen or on your TV set, to help them to be accurate in the science that they portray. You don't want noise in outer space, for example. That doesn't make sense. There's no molecules in space that can't vibrate. And the reason we want that, the reason we feel so strongly that we'd like these stories to be accurate, first of all, we think it makes for a better story. And second of all, people believe what they see. So it's actually a way of teaching accurate information through all the STEM fields. So it's a very cool service. We're not paid for it, those of us who consult to it, but I'd say about once a month I get called by somebody in Hollywood and say, hey, I want to do this in my story. Does it make sense? And it's just like candy for me. So much fun to do.
Great. The second question I have is connecting science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is becoming more important in education every day. So what initially caught your attention about the STEM field?
Oh, it's just so cool. I mean, I think partly it's the boundlessness of it. As our technology changes every day, as the technology expands at this almost dizzying rate, the ability for our young people to innovate and change things about the world, we can't even begin to imagine it. I mean, we're in the middle of the biggest technological revolution, with the microtechnology that we have, really probably since the printing press. So I think what attracts me about it is the idea that within these fields, there's immense and often overlooked creativity. I was a high school science and English teacher, and to me that didn't seem oxymoronic at all. One topic seems to lend itself to the other. So to the extent that we can tell stories with our science and use our science to tell stories, I think our kids get smarter, and then they get to go from there and build new things.
Great, thanks. Next question is, how does your work as a Harvard Medical School professor relate to the STEM Behind Hollywood program?
Well, to reason I'm always laughing is people always say, what is a Harvard doctor doing playing around with zombies and STEM behind Hollywood? But then they say, hey, can I play too? So the short answer to that is if I can take whatever attention the Harvard name happens to bring to me and use it to highlight for people the fact that what we show folks on the big screen, whether it's the Star Trek movies or zombie movies or forensics or space or any of those things, what we show them is actually things that people believe. And if I can use that whatever that Harvard name to sort of give some prestige behind that, it's wonderful, because then people will go to these movies with a whole other way of looking at them. Will sort of think to themselves, what do I know about the math that's happening? What does warp speed happen to mean? What does it mean that a zombie virus affects this region of the brain and not the other? And I can even use it in my teaching. To be clear, I don't teach my students using zombies. That would not be fair. But I do after after programs, so evening programs with the medical students, where they'll say, let's watch a zombie movie, or let's watch a time travel movie, and let's think about the science behind it. And it's really a fun way to learn.
Well, Dr. Schlozman, we really thank you for sharing some of your expert zombie insights as we went through this activity, and we really appreciate your work with TI when it comes to zombies. And I thank you for taking part in this discussion and sharing some of your favorite aspects of the zombie apocalypse activity. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Joining us now is TI brand ambassador, Emmy-nominated actress, and real-life neuroscientist, Dr. Mayim Bialik. Dr. Bialik's role as Amy Farrah Fowler on the hit show The Big Bang Theory has made us laugh and maybe even taught us a thing or two about science. What you may not know is that Dr. Bialik holds a PhD in neuroscience from UCLA. Dr. Bialik is passionate about STEM education, and as brand ambassador for Texas Instruments, she is a firm believer in students interacting with STEM content and with TI-Nspire technology. Without further ado, welcome, Dr. Bialik.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey, Dr. Bialik.
Hello.
Dr. Bialik, we spent some time going through the zombie apocalypse activity and learning about brain functions. And I was wondering, what inspired you to become a neuroscientist?
I actually was kind of a late bloomer to the science world. I thought that science was for boys because all the boys said so, and science and math were hard for me, and I thought that meant I wasn't good at them. But I had a tutor when I was an actress in my teen years, when I was on Blossom. I had a tutor for biology who was, at that time, a young dental student at UCLA, and she was the first person who really taught me the way I needed to learn. And she was incredibly passionate about the beauty of science and the wonders of science, and it was through her that I gained the confidence and the skill set to go on to pursue neuroscience.
Wow, that's pretty exciting. In your role as TI's brand ambassador for STEM education, what is it that you do exactly?
I do a lot of different things. I happen to come from a family of teachers. Both of my parents were public school teachers with a combined, almost 70 years of teaching. So one of the neat things I get to do with TI is to talk to teachers at math conventions and science conventions. I also get to speak with students, and as you saw with Dr. Schlozman and I, we get to demo things and teach students. We do, obviously, a lot of publicity, me and TI, and I guess the idea is that if people are interested in talking to me about STEM, I'm happy to talk about it. It puts a positive face on STEM subjects and STEM education, and also a female face. So I guess I do a lot of different things, teachers, students, and honestly, kind of publicity and sort of putting myself out there. And I think, the STEM Behind Hollywood is a great example of kind of combining interests that we know young people already have with science and technology that we can provide them with in a fun way.
Right, and I know that we definitely appreciate all those different hats that seems as though you wear these days. I do understand that you had the opportunity to experience the zombie activity with Dr. Schlozman and a group of middle and high school students. In your opinion, how do you think they received it?
They loved it. I mean, you know, obviously for people like me and Dr. Steve, like who wouldn't love it? You know, it's the science behind zombies. It's so awesome. But honestly, this is sort of part of the testing process and sort of the research process that we were doing to see how, you know, actual students who may not come in with an initial interest in zombies and the science behind that, how they would react. They were incredibly engaged, and you know, we talk a lot about sort of student engagement, what that looks like and what it means. We know that it means better learning, better comprehension, and more excitement. And I mean, the whole notion of learning the science behind zombies really, really tickled them, and they were able to use the TI-Nspire and the apps for the iPad to do these simulations, and they loved it. They really, really loved it, and you really could see kind of like this can come alive in their hands.
I can definitely second that. Today I had actually used the zombie apocalypse activity with my students, and so yesterday we were learning about linear equations. Today they walked in and there was a big zombie on my screen, and it really, I'll say if nothing else, it definitely captured their attention.
That's great.
So as most people do know by now, you are an Emmy-nominated actress. How does your STEM background influence your work on the show, The Big Bang Theory?
Well, sometimes I'm asked to give, you know, to kind of fill in some of the holes in script things about neuroscience in particular, but Dr. David Saltzberg is our physics consultant. He's a professor at UCLA, and he's sort of our Big Bang expert on all things science. So sometimes, you know, I get to contribute if there's a question about something specific to neuroanatomy or neuroscience lab, but I was trained in neuropsychiatry, so I get to psychoanalyze the people I work with all the time in my head. That's more useful than you'd think.
That sounds like a lot of fun. From a neuroscience standpoint, what are some of the basic tenets of how children and adolescents learn?
I don't know, how much time do you have for me to explain it? You know, there's a lot of different ways that we know children and adults learn, but you know, I think if I use sort of the STEM behind Hollywood and specifically kind of our zombie protocol as an example, children learn well when they are interested in what they're learning. Children learn well when concepts are presented repeatedly in different ways. Children learn well when various modalities are presented to them and when different styles of learning are all addressed. So we kind of hear a lot about that everybody learns differently, and you know, there's different types of intelligence and all this sort of thing. But that's sort of one of the goals of you know, in particular these kind of applications, is to be able to appeal to a variety of different students with different learning styles, and not to sort of make a unimodular, you know, approach to any sort of instruction.
Right, and I'm not sure, Dr. Schlozman, I think that you might have something to say on that question as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, Mayim did a great job of, I'm sorry, Dr. Bialik, I don't want to say word did a great job of answering that question. The only thing I would add is you have this phenomenon of pattern recognition that actually starts to set in around age, 14 or even younger, around the onset of adolescence. And that's basically where you think you pretty much know what you need to know in order to get by in the world. Your brain has actually been taught that. So you start to engage in confirmation bias. You start to look for data that supports what you think you already know, which means they're going to yawn unless they see a zombie on the board or something like that. So if you put a zombie up there or anything exciting, anything that creates novelty, and then this is basically what Mayim was just saying, folks perk up and listen. And then you have to teach to all of those different aspects of learning that Mayim so you know, demonstrated to us just now.
Thanks.
Sure.
So, Dr. Bialik, thank you, and Dr. Schlozman, for both taking the time to answer some of those questions. And if you don't mind, we do have a few additional questions we'd like to ask you from the audience.
Sure.
And I think I saw a really great question. This is from Adrian, and the question is everything on the Big Bang Theory mathematically and scientifically correct?
So the simple answer is not always. As I mentioned, we have a fantastic physics consultant who also, consults on all the other science and engineering stuff that we do. But a lot of times we have to, sort of make compromises for the sake of simplicity in explaining something in a script or physically representing something. We try to make sure not to pick concepts that are impossible to make close to accurate. But, believe me, Dr. Salzberg and I both get emails, especially from neuroanatomy stuff, saying you can't count spores, that shouldn't be right, they should be colonies. But we do our best, and if anything is incorrect, there's been a lot of debate about it on our set with our writers as well, many of whom have science backgrounds.
Awesome. The next question, I'm going to sort of combine two people because they're very similar. It's from Cassandra and Jeanette, and the question is, Dr. Bialik, I want to inspire my female high school science students to pursue careers in STEM areas, and the problem is that our access to technology is non-existent. Any suggestions for how to inspire these young women to look outside the box?
Gosh, that sounds like a question that I'm probably not the most, the best person to ask. There's so many limitations, obviously, with budget availability and the economy in general. We happen to love our STEM Behind Hollywood website because everything's free there and downloadable. But obviously, I think there's a much larger issue of access and resources, which I'm hoping, with more attention given to it on a national level, we'll start to see changes in. But it is very frustrating.